the Honorable Ambassador of India to France. And this session is going to be chaired by Professor Govind Prasad Sharma, the chairperson of National Book Trust India, and Shri Yuvraj Malik would be moderating. This session is planned in this way that first we have, on the occasion of India, as the guest of honor country at France, which is coinciding with India at 75, we will have a keynote address by the Honorable Ambassador on various issues which permeate the world of culture, the world of books, and how the promotion of the projection of the soft power of India at international forums like this helps us. And this will be followed by an interaction with the eminent and the distinguished authors who form the part of the Indian delegation. So I would request our director to kindly start the proceedings.
Very good afternoon to all. We have our guest, Ambassador, His Excellency Shri Javed Ashraf Ji. To start with, I'll just bring a brief background about the participation of India as guest of honor country in Paris Book Festival in compliance to the joint statement between President and Prime Minister. We are participating. It was supposed to be done 2 years back, but due to COVID, it got postponed. Today, we are participating as guest of honor, and the same reciprocal arrangement. France is going to be the guest of honor country in New Delhi World Book Fair in the next upcoming edition. Today, we have a team of eminent writers, scholars, and then a lot of publishing team with us. So I'll request our ambassador to just give an opening remark and to our authors, our team, delegations, about participation of India as guest of honor, and also at the time when India is celebrating 75th year of independence. It's a very significant moment for India to start with and put our culture, heritage, literary landscape to the global audience. So I'll request you just to give a remark for this.
Well, thank you very much, and to you, Yuvraj, to Professor Sharma, and to the audience here, to all the authors from India, publishers, and participants who are here for this very special occasion. Now, I'll be very honest, if you see the program, the topic said India at 75, but now I'm going to have to deal with some other set of questions. But first of all, this is, of course, a very special occasion. The Paris Book Fair is a very prestigious event. It's in a city, as I keep saying, which is a global city that embraces the world. It's itself been a center of learning, which has made enormous contribution to human knowledge, advancement, thought, and progress. And it has the highest set of achievements in aesthetics, in art, in culture, in philosophy, and as a distinct civilizational contribution, linguistic contribution to the world. So this makes our participation very important and special over here. It is also a fact that this is at this point of time in the flux that the world is going through, in a world in transition. India and France have a very strong strategic partnership. This is one of our most trusted and closest relationships in the world. It is based on our democratic values. It is based on sense of strategic autonomy, which is based in our respective conception of ourselves as societies, with independence of thought, pride in our heritage, and in what we bring to the world. It is also based on a real commitment to international law, to rules-based international order, and to a multipolar world anchored in multilateralism. Now, foundations of the relationships are not, especially between democracies, are not merely laid by what the governments do, and clearly we do quite a lot, but it is also built by what the people think of each other, the goodwill that exists in society, the knowledge and understanding of each other. And it's very important in our relationship because there was a time, let's say when France was exploring Asia 3 centuries ago, 2 centuries ago, when in the height of colonial era, that there was a new interest in studying languages, culture, history, philosophies, religious traditions of Asia, including in India, of course. And there are so many different strands of this relationship. You look here in Paris, you will see in INALCO 6 Indian languages are being taught. The first study of Indiology in India here started in the early 19th century. But as Europe and, in fact, France retreated back to Europe in the post-colonial era, and when we had a situation of the Cold War, when the preoccupations were the conflicts on the European continent and in other parts of a newly independent world, I would say that the level of interest and the level of participation on scholarship, on literature, philosophy of coming out of Asia, in a sense retreated. And the evidence is very visible when you go across universities, you go across centers of learning. Yet there are people here with such fantastic awareness and knowledge, but I would say that this is still a very limited audience now. Now that must change, and I've said for some very important reasons. One, of course, as I said, that we live in an interconnected world. One problem of this digitally interconnected world is that it can amplify and exaggerate our prejudices, our stereotypes, and reinforce sometimes the fault lines and misunderstandings that exist. And it is an irony in a digitally connected world. So we need to transcend that and get out of that comfort. That's one point. The second is the need for, as the center of gravity of global opportunities and challenges begin to shift towards what we now call the Indo-Pacific region or Asia and the Oceania, it is important for people in the rest of the world to understand what is it that animates, what is it that drives the people of that region, and that includes the world's second most populous country, the world's largest democracy, at the very heart of this Indo-Pacific region, at the crossroads of its maritime routes. So that's the other important reason why it is necessary to change and to turn our intellectual lens back in Asia and the Oceania or the Indo-Pacific region. The third is, of course, as I said, that India, France, and India-European relationships are poised for a big leap. And it isn't just because we are democracy or we believe in rules-based order, but when you see the world that is becoming increasingly contested, especially among the great powers, and when the international systems and institutions are eroding, the relationship between India and Europe, India and France, can be a stable anchor for the values and for the ideals that we share, and because of our inherently pacifist approach to the world. We are neither in the game of territorial claims and influence, nor are we in any way interested in undermining the international system. So this is the other reason why this intellectual discourse must increase between India and France, India and Europe. And fourth, of course, is it links back to my first point, which is that in the world that is emerging out of the flux of our time, and I mentioned the Indo-Pacific region, is the new center of gravity despite the current war in Europe. India will be an increasingly important and relevant factor in shaping the world. not just because we are 1/6 of humanity or because we are a strong military power, we are a strong scientific power, or we are now among the largest economies of the world and one of its fastest growing, a digital powerhouse in the 21st century, which is the digital era. But I think fundamentally more important is because of the heritage, the thought process that has been a constant stream through our history with all its twists and turns. And it is the fundamental Vedantic belief in oneness. And that oneness, that cosmic oneness, the fundamental unity of this universe, of this world, is being the driving force of our civilizational ethos. And it has also led to what we frequently hear about Vasudeva Kutumbakam, the world is one family. And it is something which we believe in very sincerely. It is why when we have reached out to the world, it has always been in a spirit of cooperation and partnership, supporting where there is need, standing in solidarity with those who have been oppressed or have faced injustices of history. And also when there has been need, for example, during the COVID period or during the current food crisis, when we have offered that we can deal with our own stocks to help ameliorate the food scarcity as a result of the war in Ukraine. So we have something to contribute. The ideas of Mahatma Gandhi, which remain perhaps the most enduring idea of the 20th century. We have seen that contest of so many isms that have taken place in the 20th century, but it's the idea that still endures across the world. And it is again rooted in that deep civilizational belief in ahimsa, non-violence, in peaceful coexistence, in communion with nature. Perhaps, not many of us realize, and it is important to emphasize that when we speak of climate change today, it is something that was deeply, the respect for nature is deeply inherent in the ethos, where we see ourselves as part of nature, not on top of nature. That means we don't see that nature exists for us to exploit, but we see our existence in harmony. And one of the finest examples is the existence of sacred groves in India, which has actually helped preserve biodiversity against the rising population, which has grown, by the way, in 75 years from 360 million to 1.4 billion. So in the same space, 1 billion more people live. And they're living in harmony, they're living in coexistence, walking in step towards a shared future. And all of this, despite the great debates and contests we have about ideas in India, about who we are as a nation and as a people, the fundamental unity stems from this belief in that pluralism and diversity is the fundamental foundation of nature and therefore of mankind. And you see this today. Look around at the script that you see today of Indian languages. And by the way, if you ask an Indian, I'm from Delhi. If I go 250 kilometers north to Punjab, I can't read the signs written in Gurmukhi script. If I go to Tamil Nadu or even to Calcutta, I can follow the Bengali language, but I can't read it. Now, how does a country of 1.4 billion people with its own languages, own script? I mean, in Europe, if you speak German, but you come to Paris, you can read the road signs. But if you go to Tamil Nadu from Delhi or go to Kerala, you might not be able to, which is why if you go to Delhi, you'll see the road signs in 4 languages. Not many countries in the world will do that for you. So the world has to appreciate that in this ability to stay together, to bring that harmony, to that unity in diversity, the unifying spirit, is where the answer to this now increasingly fractious, climatically challenged, resource-starved world is. And this is what I think is an important contribution that we will be making to the world. And therefore, what we do in terms of hard power, economics, and digital are important, but it is also important for us to engage in this wonderful discourse of the spoken word, the written word, of performing arts, and you've just seen some fine examples of visual arts, of the ideas of philosophies and culture. All of this are important for us today to be able to take to the world, and as we have done through our history, to also, with that sense of openness, absorb and embrace everything that is the finest in the world that is to offer to us, and that is our openness. So this is why today, in the 75th year of our independence, when I can say that at 75, India has regained the spirit of the youth. Because when you are young, you have energy, you have enterprise, you have optimism, you have confidence, you have dreams, you have aspirations, you want to reach the highest scales, and you have resolve. You're no longer tired, you're not tired, you are not weary. This is the spirit of the India of 75 years. Not one that says it has done everything or has settled on a course. It is still discovering itself, as an adolescent and a teenager will discover. It will still debate with itself, it will still fight with itself, but it will know that it is its destiny that it has to work for. So whoever goes to India from here now, and when I speak to CEOs or others, they say the first thing that strikes you is the optimism. That is why, and the energy, and that is why I say at 75, we are once again a very young, not just because most of India is young, but our spirit is very young today, and we are ready to meet the world in equal terms. Thank you very much for my meandering thoughts on what was an unplanned question and answer session. If anyone needs an interpretation, I think it would be difficult, so please bear with me.
Thank you so much. As Sir has brought out very clearly that the way India has evolved in the new changing world order, India is going to matter, with whether it's our youth dividends or rich cultural heritage or our role in the global outlook. So there's a question which I have received. It says that the sovereignty is just the new world order. It's getting reshaped. So how the scholarly people are going to contribute and make this sovereign outlook redefine itself?
If you put on a geopolitical lens, then sovereignty is a territorial concept. That means I have a territory which defines the boundaries of my country, and of course, we all know boundaries are not immutable, or they're not changeable, or they haven't changed in history. But at any given point of time, we take time as permanent, the present as permanent, and therefore we have a geopolitical concept or an international law concept of sovereignty, which is that I exercise right on the land that exists. But there is, I think, in a philosophical idea, something which is really in the realm of thought, which is, do I have the independence of thought, independence of action? Can I take my decisions based on my own examination of what my interests are, what my principles are, what my values are, and where do I want to be? And I think this is a far more fundamentally valuable and relevant definition of sovereignty. And it may apply differently in different contexts. So in a globally connected world where global challenges like climate change exist, sovereignty cannot mean that I simply act as though there are no consequences of my action for others. Sovereignty here would mean that I act in the most enlightened examination of what I should do to for my people and for the world at large, but not be forced to say that this is what somebody else has asked me to do, which is where I think India is changing. India today is not defensive about its interests. It doesn't say that the best way to protect my sovereignty is to simply retreat behind four walls. It says that, okay, if there is a global challenge, I will present my own views on this. Today, I don't know how many people know that we may be a global leader in terms of public digital infrastructure. I don't think many Indians realize that we are perhaps way ahead of others in creating public digital infrastructure as a public good, not owned by a few oligarchs in Silicon Valley or by state control. We have been able to build a sense of sovereignty around our public. I'm taking a very modern new thing and speaking about something that's not spoken about. That is, we've created a very sovereign public digital infrastructure despite it being seamlessly connected to the rest of the world. That came out of our conception of what is sovereignty. That is, that we must be able to give people the freedom of our choices and to have equitable access to the benefits of digital technology, which is why it's an open, free, and inclusive one. So sovereignty must be seen as a dynamic context and applied to see how we can achieve them. And which is why I would say in 21st century, sovereignty, many people don't still understand it, is going to be linked to digital sovereignty. Where our data resides, who owns our data, who has consent on it, who decides, how does everybody have an equitable access to the fruits of this? That's one side of it. Now you ask me, how do authors contribute to it? I would say that the authors need to examine the notion of sovereignty in a world where our interconnection has increased, where the challenges are global, but where the principles of nationhood, where the principles of what a country is remains very relevant, very strong. In fact, I would say that it is going to become even stronger. Questions of what is identity, what is ethnicity, what defines a nation, all of this will become very important. How do you reconcile all of this with the sort of decisions we have to take in a world where there are externalities of our action and where there is a context? So some of us may have to look through our own traditional values and things and see where do we draw lessons. And I'll give you an example. When in 2015, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was coming here to Paris for COP21, and we were in a sense debating on what do we do about climate change, how do we communicate to our people, how do we communicate to the world. So he decided on two things. One of them was that he said to our own people, we need to communicate in the context of our traditional heritage and our traditional respect for nature. Merely explaining it in terms of science, important as it is going to be lost. The second thing was he said, let us draw upon the wisdom of all the world. And we came out with a book together with France, which had quotations from traditions of respect for nature from across the world, in every culture, every civilization, every religion, every language. It's a fantastic book. So that's one way to address questions of interdependence and sovereignty and the choices we make. For those who are in the tech world, those who are in the world of economics, will have to examine how in this dynamic world we'll do it. For those who study history and look at history from new lens, they'll have to see what is in a post-colonial era, post-industrial society, a multipolar world which is beyond now the unipolar moment, which is becoming a coexistence it was before the industrial age of multiple systems coexisting with each other, sometimes colliding, sometimes cooperating. How will this emerging world define the notion of sovereignty? These are some things which require a great deal of intellectual rigor. For policymakers and for practitioners like us, this will be great inputs.
Thank you so much. Very well brought out, sir. We have Chamu Shastri ji asking a question for you.
Sir, all the Bharatiya languages and their literature have always been promoting all-inclusive thoughts from times immemorial, which has been the principal cementing factor for the inbuilt unity of Bharat. So, could it be a model for a new world order? What is your take?
No, and that's what I think I was speaking about when I was talking about what we can contribute, and this is precisely the point. Even when you look at, I just talked about how inconceivable it may be for the world to believe that you can have 1.4 billion people speaking not just 22 official languages, but many more. And it is hard to use a number because some may feel excluded if you use 1 million or 2 million as a threshold. So it's best to leave that as saying there are hundreds and thousands of them. How do we live with each other? How do we communicate with each other? How do we find, despite the presence of every religion in India, despite the presence of every faith, believers, non-believers, traditions, cultures, how do we manage to live together as something which is given? It is not something we even ask ourselves when we hear multiple languages in a bus. We just say. So there is a model for this. The second principle I'd like to say is, democracy will, it's a relatively new political organization in the world, and it is a product of the industrial age. But if you think of democracy as not just the one form, a rigid form of political system, but the tradition of debate, openness, pluralism, plurality of thought, which is, has been there since the ancient times in India, when we say that truth is one, sage see it in different ways. I mean, I'm not going to attempt to say that in Sanskrit in front of you, but so that has been the defining principle. And when you think of the post-colonial world, so many countries became independent. Many took to the path of democracy, but many fell by the wayside, including in our neighborhood. But why is it that despite all the initial pressures, the pain of partition, the integration of 562 of princely states, the economic challenges, all of that taken into account, our democracy remains resilient today and is becoming stronger by the day? It is because it is not just a gift of the colonial era. I mean, political organization maybe, but it is the tradition of accepting that there could be alternative points of view or different ways of looking at things, and therefore, and this must be resolved through debate, has been an ancient tradition in India. And we need to convey this aspect, that is, it isn't just the form of political, formal, ritualistic political organizations, important as they are. Institutions remain very critical, but the ethos, the traditions need to be deeply embedded in every nation. And this is something which we've had for forever, when you can go back to the republican systems from the Magadha era and beyond. So this is how, two examples of coexistence in disparity, in differences, and then on the very ethos of democratic traditions and what it entails. That is what it is.
Thank you so much, sir. We have a historian, Vikram Sampath asking a question for you.
Hello, sir, and thank you for that wonderful exposition. I think the strength of India has always been one as a knowledge-producing society, a knowledge-worshipping society. And in the last 75 years, I think this same ethos has manifested itself in various fields like IT, BT, and satellite technology, and so on. So in the, say, the next 25 or 50 years, how do you foresee this knowledge-seeking quest that we have as a nation manifesting in which fields? Will we ever again become the preferred choice of, say, universities abroad? Will we have a Nalanda, Takshashila, Vikramashila again, where people from all over the world come to our universities to study rather than the other way, which is how it is currently? And what is perhaps the role of countries like France in ensuring we get there in the knowledge economy? Thank you.
Let me say this, one, at the level of principles, and let me answer this at the level of policy. At the level of principles, I think we need to promote a very strong culture of autonomy and freedom of thought. Knowledge is advanced when human mind and human spirit is free like a bird and it just soars. And when knowledge is pursued, not just for functional reasons, for knowledge's sake. And this is a very important determinant in many of the countries outside which has led to it. Second is that every field of human endeavor must have the same respect. You cannot say that, okay, science or engineering or maths and things, there should not be hierarchy of knowledge and saying. So you create a reverence for just the pursuit. Societal respect for teachers and professors. No society can progress without unless we start teaching our gurus, our teachers in school and our professors as the most valued people in our society, not civil servants, not political leaders, not CEOs. Because the foundations of any nation is laid in what we invest in knowledge and education. That is the principle. And I remember in South Korea when I was asking the chairman of Hyundai, one word, please describe Korea's success. He said, education. And he said, if you ask me 3 words, I would say education, education, education. So I said, okay, my case rests. So as a matter of principle, let us not, sometimes we may not like certain things, we may not like certain ideas, but just let it flourish. Let it all evolve in it. And then, so respect. Third is that passion for excellence. You know, I really believe that as a country, in everything we do, and whoever we are, whatever jobs we do, we need to have that passion for excellence. How do we inculcate that culture? And for a nation where it was, brought up on the very ethos of, Bhagavad Gita, which speaks about, pursuing something as dharma, not looking at the reward in itself, is something which we have lost track of, that we connect everything we do to its functional value, not the joys and the pursuit of excellence. So this is very important for us to achieve. As a matter of policy, I would translate this into some very practical things. I think we need to increase the ratio of GDP that goes into higher education by a massive level. We need to cut down somewhere or the other, I don't know, but it has to be done. We need to have autonomous private and public institutions, all. But we need to treat, I didn't like the fact that I've seen directors of IITs and IIMs actually not just reverential, but fearful of joint secretaries in the ministries. It is absurd. And I used to tell them, I said, how can you be treated like this? What will happen to them? So we have to invest a lot, treat them and by the way, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, I mean, we were built by the likes of Vikram Sarabhais and the Homi Bhabas. They didn't give a damn to bureaucrats like us, they were treated in a very different way. And this is important for all of us to understand. Then we need to focus on infrastructure. in a big way. Research laboratories, incentives, and we have the best minds to take advantage. Then we look at what are the areas of, and I'm not being contradictory when I say that we must allow knowledge to be pursued for knowledge's sake in every field, irrespective, sociology, history, anthropology, languages, soil, to everything. You want to study the sky, astronomy, everything should be equal. But also, we need to have a strategic focus at policy level. Digital, clean energy, sustainability, industries that will define the future of mankind is where we need to also have a strategic focus. Not at the expense of others, but where we say these are the areas we will invest in. I can tell you this, today in France, they're actually looking at our public digital infrastructure and how we have created a data empowerment and protection architecture and whether they can apply it to Europe. Right? And I'm working very closely with them. So last week we had a very big session also with the co-founder of Infosys, Nandan Nilikani, and with the iSpirit team, which Ms. Murthy would be very aware of in her own city of Bangalore. In fact, the French digital ambassador is today in Bangalore and meeting all of his, probably at the Infosys at this point in time. So similarly, if we can identify areas where people will say this is real work going on, and let us be concrete about these things. So practical policy aspects and new education policy, I mean, they have spoken about, seeks to address that. It's a bold policy. It is innovative. It has got ambitions. It is now for us as government machinery to clear the way for implementation, because, you know, we have infinite capacity to muddle things up also. And, you know, so that, as all governments everywhere in the world have that capacity to do. So this is my answer to your question.
Thank you so much, sir. We have Mr. Birad Yagnik asking question.
Good afternoon, sir. You know, we are very, very happy about the government-to-government connect which India and France have. It's actually the envy of the world, that kind of a connect we have. As far as a cultural connect, people-to-people connect, just your thoughts on something very unique that can be done. One of the ideas that we just thought was the French cuisine that is over here. They have an encyclopedia of gastronomy of French. Can they help us create something like that in India for our cuisine? Similarly, the French museums have tremendous expertise in the kind of restoration they do, which we can, you know, have a parallel to things. Some thoughts on that, sir, or any other initiative that you may think?
Well, let me answer the second question first, because we are already working on it.
Right.
To see a collaboration between Louvre and to set, you know, for the modernization of the National Museum. Our Prime Minister, I mean, is got a real passion for museums and developing museums in the country. He told me he'd like to see a museum in every city, a museum devoted to every city. And that's a wonderful thought of creating a soul for the city. When you know that a city has a heritage, has a past, this is how it has evolved. Because a city must be a living being, not just infrastructure. And it is an identity when it has a past, when it can document how it has evolved. So there is an interest in doing this. And we are working with Agency France Museum, with the government here, to create a partnership, to see if it's possible to work together and what will be the financing and operational mechanism to partner with Louvre, which is the world's most prestigious and well-known museum, for a national museum, but also to set up a center for excellence in museums, conservation, presentation, design, how to make museums an attractive place, a living place, not just a static description. How do we make museums an immersive experience where we go and come out feeling a little, you know, enlightened, a little entertained also, These are very important to attract people and not just have static displays. So these are issues we are working on. We hope that when we have a next summit, not now, but when down the line, when we can do the homework, we'll work on that. So yeah, cuisine, I think we really do need to document, and it's one of my objectives is how do we present cuisine of every state abroad? With no due apologies, when you think of Indian cuisine, you think of North Indian cuisine, right? Outside a tikka, a butter chicken, and so on and so forth. But we have just the world's richest heritage of cuisine. I mean, you can. So I've actually worked with a bright young chef, Indian chef, who's in Lyon. He studied in the best culinary school here. I'm a great fan of his. He has his own restaurant here. I get him from Lyon to cook sometimes in Paris. And he can actually create cuisine out of every state of India. So I once made him do a menu that covered 7 states. So the next time I'll cover 7 and then do it. So yes, we can work with them. Here, it is really a part of the heritage. President Macron and everyone else will go to the best culinary school for their graduation ceremony. And it has done wonders to project France soft power abroad, but also to attract tourists. And they spend like crazy on food over here, which other European countries can't really boast of. So this is something it's a good idea, and it's something which we should work in India also, but we'll work with them on how we can present. My hope is that this year we will do a Festival of India here, subject to global situation and being able to raise money. Because money is what makes the dreams come true, is to do a big festival in India on the streets of Paris, with food and folk music and dance and village and so on and so forth, and readings and things. Make it look like a really noisy Indian place with a variety of food and things. Hopefully that will happen. If it doesn't, so be it, but then that's at least an aspiration.
We have Sudha Murthy asking a question for you, sir.
This is nothing to do with software and digital power.
Sorry?
Nothing to do with the software that our company takes care. This is regarding Bollywood, I want to ask you. Bollywood has a great effect in many countries. I have seen a place like Iceland, Cuba, some God-forsaken places. Rarely any Indian visitor go, but still people can talk about Bollywood. I want to know in France, is there any such effect of Bollywood movies? Because in Germany, once I had been to Germany and I put the TV on, Mohabbatein was on the screen and Shah Rukh Khan was talking in German language. So do you have that kind of a programs in France?
There is a provenance to Germany's love for Bollywood. And I can say some credit for it, and some of us who were in Germany in the early, mid-90s. I was posted in Berlin from 95 to 99. I was a young officer. I had all the time. So I used to see 5 films at Berlinale in a row. And I spoke to the Berlin Film Festival, and I say, in your panorama, I don't see any Bollywood film. I see great films in competition from Kerala, from Bengal and others, but no Bollywood. So they said, we go to a country and we look at 10, 15 films in 2 days and come back. If you can arrange that, we will. So the first film we managed to get into the panorama was Dil Se. I don't know what it was, and it was a stupendous success. The next year it was Hum Dil Dil Chuke Sanam. Then it was the Shah Rukh Khan mania. And after that, RTL started seeing the response of film every Sunday, and the rest is history. Here also, the interest in Bollywood is strong. Last December, just behind Eiffel, there is Trocadero. There is a national theater called Chalio. And there was a musical from India for the first time called A Passage to Bollywood, Ashley Lobo's creation. 15 shows, 2,000 seats in that hall, all sold out for 15 shows. And there were no Indians there. There were only French people. And at the end of the show, when the rhythm would really pick up for the music in the curtain call, everyone would get up and start dancing. I mean, there were in a couple of days. It is a huge, I think, asset for us. It is, in a sense, you can also say that this year in Cannes, we are thinking of doing something special of India's journey of 75 years through its cinema. How does cinema of India, the popular cinema, capture the age of idealism, the age of rage, the age of rebellion, the age of cynicism, the age of love, the age of romance, and the age of realism, all of that? It's our hope that we'll be able to showcase it. I'm talking to Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, and if they succeed in putting it together, it'll be great. But it's something to think about. But it is gaining popularity. Bollywood music, Bollywood dance are all extremely popular over here as well. Yeah, thank you.
We have last and quick question from Shri Anand Nilkantanji. Quick and
Good afternoon,
short.
sir. Only thing I want to ask is, one thing we can learn from France is the aesthetics. We have perhaps lost the aesthetics in our, say, something close to my heart. Most of the temples, which are 1,300-year-old, 1,700-year-old, people are putting paint, Asian paint and other things in the sculptures. They are putting plastic sheets in heritage temples. How to control this? Our streets, Paris is so aesthetic. We have 3,000, 4,000, 5,000-year-old cities, and it really saddens me. How France can help us to get back our aesthetics?
Well, I think we have to help ourselves get back our aesthetics. I don't think we really do need... I mean, there are some technological issues we can discuss, but I think we have the best of engineers, best of minds. I think that consciousness is growing now. We see it, look, over the years, over centuries, things have been the way they are. Last 75 years, we've struggled with our poverty, with our basis of existence. We have created Archaeological Survey of India, which has its own challenges, like many government departments, budgets, bureaucracy, processes, etc. But I think that there is a lot of interest coming back. Once we take pride in ourselves of who we are, then we'll take pride in our heritage and we'll find solutions. I also believe corporates need to come in as they do in other countries, and I can say that for Singapore, where there is a lot of corporate support for revival. It is not lost, it is not behind us. I have spoken to the National Monuments Council over here, not on the fact that they can come, but on the kind of technological solutions they find to deal with these issues. We can obviously collaborate, we promote ASI's collaboration with them. But I believe that you're already seeing that changes in India in many places. I mean, Varanasi is one great example of how things have changed, Red Fort, how things have changed. And it's picking up. In Old Delhi, it is picking up. Once we start taking pride, and it comes also sometimes with, an increase in levels of living standards, in consciousness, in awareness, etc. People are traveling abroad and asking the same questions now that you are asking, and then they're saying, let's do something about it. So it's got to be a whole of society approach. We have to refrain from making our places filthy. We have to also see how we can contribute. Why can't we have community organizations take ownership of one monument? In Kathmandu, they do that. Guthis, which are clan associations, take responsibility for one of their many wonderful sites, and they are, even in the earthquake, while the earth was shaking and their houses were crumbling, they were busy collecting statues, pillars, etc., to preserve them. So community consciousness combined with state effort and with, I think, corporate support will go a long way. But the first thing is a belief in ourselves and who we are. Thank you.
So thank you so much for taking all the questions very patiently. Now I'll request Professor Sharma, Chairman, National Book Trust, just to conclude the session.
I'll interpret for you. आप हिंदी में बोलिए, मैं interpret करता हूँ.
As you like, please. आज का दिन हम लोगों के लिए बहुत ही सुखद है, जिनने इस पूरे मेले को आयोजित करने में भारत की ओर से बहुत बड़ी भूमिका निभाई और जिनके मार्गदर्शन में हम लोग इतना कुछ कर पाए, उन्हीं के द्वारा भारत के 75 वर्ष पूरे होने के बाद भारत के संबंध में, उसकी प्रगति के संबंध में, विभिन्न क्षेत्रों में जो हमारी उपलब्धियां हुई हैं और हमें क्या करना है, इसके संबंध में सुनना अपने आप में एक सुखद संयोग है। एक ऐसे व्यक्ति के द्वारा कुछ कहा जाना जिनका स्थान नीतियों के निर्धारण में है, विचारों के निर्धारण में है, विदेशी संबंधों के निर्धारण में है, उनके द्वारा सुनना अपने आप में एक बड़ा मायना रखता है। मैं समझता हूँ हम सब लोगों के लिए ऐसे अवसर बहुत कम आते हैं, जबकि इतनी सरलता से हमारे राजदूत महोदय हमारे बीच में आए और हम जो चाहते हैं, जो प्रश्न हम करना चाहते हैं, उनको सहज रूप में समझाते हुए उत्तर दें। मैं पूरे प्रतिनिधि मंडल की ओर से और व्यक्तिगत अपनी ओर से आपका आभारी हूँ कि आपने हमारे निमंत्रण को स्वीकार किया और बहुत ही सरल और सहज रूप में यहाँ उपस्थित होकर के हम लोगों के बीच में वक्तव्य दिया। नमस्कार, धन्यवाद।
आपका मैं आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ। धन्यवाद, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आपका।
Donc je vais traduire en français le message du président de National Book Trust, qui est la Fondation nationale d'édition en Inde. Donc il remercie vivement notre ambassadeur d'être cette journée très joyeuse, apporter déjà son soutien pour organiser ce festival de livres côté indien. Et c'est rare d'avoir une occasion où un ambassadeur qui vienne non seulement donner un discours, mais prendre toutes les questions qui ont été posées et donner des réponses avec une telle simplicité mais efficacité. Et c'est vraiment un grand jour pour nous et on remercie vivement pour votre présence et votre soutien.
Thank you. So there is this book launch for 5 minutes at Hampi. Before we start the next session on Sanskrit, the living language, we have a book launch on Hampi, and we have 2 distinguished scholars from France, and I would request Mr. Tusharanshu Sharma, the first Secretary of Embassy of India, to kindly moderate this particular proceedings of the book launch. यश चेयर चाहिए एक पीछे से around.
Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We have with us extremely eminent scholars from France, Mr. Pierre Filiosa and Madame Vasundhara Filiosa, who really are the flag bearers of Indian culture here, and they've dedicated their lives to the Indian cause. They have written and edited a book called Hampi, which recounts the religious, social, political happenings, occurrences in the Vijayanagar Empire in the northeast of Karnataka. And this book got completed in January this year. And on this prestigious occasion, we would like to release it. Donc, on a deux scolaires très très éminents avec nous, Monsieur Pierre Filiosa et Madame Vasundhara Filiosa avec nous, qui ont dédié ses vies pour la cause indienne. Ils ont édité et écrit un livre qui s'appelle Hampi, qui est à propos d'un empire de Vijayanagar de l'État de Karnataka, sud de l'Inde. Aujourd'hui, on va lancer ce livre parce que c'est une occasion, très grande occasion de salon de livre où l'Inde est pays d'honneur et on n'a pas le mieux occasion que ça pour ce livre. Donc j'invite Monsieur l'ambassadeur pour dire quelques mots avant de lancer le livre. Ça.
Well done. See, our officers are good. I'm the only illiterate in French. Well, first of all, I must tell you that I have for them the greatest of regards. They're two wonderful people, great scholars, devoted their lives to the study of India. Their knowledge on Hampi is unmatched and unparalleled. They're great Sanskrit scholars, and at a time when that great language seems to have lost the level of popularity, they are the great flag bearers of that language. Both, and Vasundhara ji had come to France, I think was in 60s or something, and then she made her home, and then of course Professor Pierre has been traveling, both of them, to India. It's really, when I saw that book, both the French and the English version, the spectacular, I must say, and I don't think he'll say this, he will, his collaborators deserve a very big round of applause, including the publisher, who did it out of pure passion and love for what they had done, for one of the greatest sites in the world, really. And I think it is not just, when you see that book, you won't just see the magnificently photographed and brilliantly written text, magnificently photographed and brilliantly written, but you will come back an expert on Hampi in ways that people living in Hampi may not know. So I would say that for all of you, this is a book that you will treasure. Even if you're living in Bangalore or in Mysore or in Hampi, this has to be on your shelf. And if you're living in France, the French version has to be on your shelf. But before we release the book, I'm going to ask the authors to say a few words in Sanskrit and then translate it for us, because we want to hear the beauty of that language.
I hope it works. Lila gala lula lola kalavyala vilasine Ganeshaya namo nila kamala malakantaye. It is usual to start any function, any event with a prayer to Ganesha. This prayer has something special. It has been authored by a mathematician, a great mathematician of Maharashtra, who lived in the 9th century. His works were in advance in the universal knowledge of mathematics and astronomy in his time. He was also a poet. And this is why I am attracted to India, because there are great aesthetes, great scientists, great thinkers who have at the same time the same interest and the same genius to bring some perfection in art and in science. And this is characteristic of Sanskrit literature. This is characteristics of all Indian culture, especially the traditional one. And I say the traditional one, we enter in the modern world. I am not sure that Bollywood is traditional. It says it is. it pretends to be, but there is one aesthetics which has to be preserved. And our goal when we study India, Indian things, Indian sites, Indian literature, she is a specialist of Canada. I am a more specialized in Sanskrit, but we have concentrated our efforts on a particular site, which is Hampi. I presume that all Indians here have visited Hampi. Is it true?
No, all of them have. Or all of them have.
All of them. Okay. I will give a prize to everyone. And if there is anyone who has not yet gone to Hampi, I invite him to go as soon as possible. Now, the most appropriate person to speak about Hampi is a child of this country. And
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I'll start with the Hampi. The start. Hampi was a capital. Hampi was first it was started to be a pilgrim center, and then it became a secondary residence for the Chalukyas of Badami, and then Chalukyas of Kalyan, and then Vaisalas, all these things who ruled from Karnataka. And then, in the 14th century, it became the capital of a big kingdom. And you will immediately say it was Vijayanagara kingdom. I'm sorry to oppose you, because the name of the kingdom was never Vijayanagara. It was the name of the kingdom was Karnataka Samrajya, and the capital was Vijayanagar. And usually you say that it is the Vidyaranya, he prayed to the goddess Bhuvaneshwari, and she showered gold upon him. And I invite you to read all the inscriptions. ICHR had published 4,000 inscriptions so far, which have been published. There are 4,000, and if you read those 4,000 inscriptions, not a single one will speak about Bhuvaneshwari and Vidyaranya, who are the association of Vidyaranya and Bhuvaneshwari showering gold upon him. This the story, cock and bull story, started only in the 18th century. And the British historian, the first one was Sewell, who wrote the history of so-called forgotten empire, that is Vijayanagara. And he used all these 18th, 19th century documents and the fake copper plates and all that. And as a result, you are misconducted. And for more than a century, you have been calling the empire, which did not exist by that name, Vijayanagara. The name of the kingdom was Karnataka Samrajya, with its capital, Vijayanagara, that is Hampi. And the person who was responsible for this Karnataka Samrajya, it was not Vidyaranya, it was Vidyatirtha, his guru, who was a far-sighted person, and in this commencement of the new empire, two persons worked very hard. And those two persons are Hoysala Ballala III and his queen, Krishna Itai. Nobody had, not a single historian, history book mentions her name. So by reading these 4,000 inscriptions and the contemporaneous literature, you will come to know that name of the kingdom was Karnataka Samrajya, and it was a Hindu Samrajya which was spreading from Krishna in the north up to Cape Comorin in the south, and the two oceans were east and western borders. Such a big country, big kingdom was ruled by Karnataka kings, and and the name of the and the language was Kannada. So hold the language of the kingdom was Kannada, although there was Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh. they allowed them to read in that language, but whenever they had to say something in the Desha Bhasha, it used to be always Kannada. So that is how Karnataka became very important, and till the 16th century, till 1565, after the Battle of Talikota, that fatal battle, the king of Karnataka lost his power, lost his kingdom, but his vassals continued the name Karnataka, Nayaks of Karnataka, and they were ruling from Tanjavur, Madurai, and all that. And that is why you have, in the heart of Tamil Nadu, you have Karnataka Sangeet developed. And the British did another very stupid thing, which injustice to Karnataka. They told, they forbade the Maharaj of Mysore to call himself as Maharaj of Mysore, Maharaj of Karnataka, but they made him to call himself as Sansthanik of Mysore, and the Nawab of Arcot, they called him Nawab of Carnatic. You see what injustice they have done to Karnataka. So now it is our duty to study all those 4,000 inscriptions which have been published and rewrite the history of this Karnataka Samrajya. That is what happened. And in this kingdom, I just mentioned you two kings who ruled and who made the name of Karnataka Samrajya heard beyond the oceans. And that was Devaraya II, who ruled over Karnataka from 1424 to 1446 AD. And then Krishna Devaraya from 1510 to 1529. And during Devaraya II's period, this, the glory of Karnataka reached its zenith, and Shaiva literature developed. And in the Krishna Devaraya's times, once again, the glory reached its summit, and the Vaishnava literature developed. So they were subservient monarchs, and they encouraged all the literature, and they allowed people to worship or practice their religions. And there is the stupid saying that they did not, they encouraged Shaivism and then Vaishnavism, etc. No, they were subservient monarchs, and they encouraged, because the time was such that all the alien invasions were coming. So they had to maintain a kind of peace and order in the kingdom. So they could not, they did not favor one religion or one section. So this is, I just invite people to study the inscriptions now, and forget all that has been published by the British and other scholars now, and start from ABCD. Start from Sri Ganeshaya Namaha. Voila. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Before we release the book, I would like Ambassador and Chairman, sir, to honor our eminent authors in the traditional way by Indian silk. Now we can move to the release of this glorious book of a glorious empire. It's in French and English, so both the versions are here.
So may I say just a word? This event was to take place 2 years ago, but you know the unfortunate fate of this book fair. It has been delayed and delayed, but I said that for my part and for our part, it was a boon because we were in confinement, complete lockdown. We were separated from the world and no obligations at all. And the product was this book. It has given the leisure, sufficient leisure to produce the book. I wish also to express our thanks and our gratitude to Mr. Yoko, who is the editor, with his friend Dr. Poggi.
Monsieur Yoko, vous dites quelque chose à propos de Monsieur Yoko.
Oui, j'étais en train de lui dire. Mr. Yoko is the editor with his collaborator, Mr. Poggi. Both their names are there as editors, and they are not ordinary editors because they have done this out of a feeling of patronage and out of interest and passion for the same site. Mr. Yoko has been living, going to India, residing in India for long periods, and he has visited many places, and he has felt the greatness of the most beautiful pieces of art in India, especially in the south. And in this collection of now there are three books, Khajuraho, Ellora, and Hampi. I am glad that Hampi has come as the third one. We have only one other year, that he will continue his patronage, and we may continue. There are a sufficient number of treasures on the soil of India. We have a lot of work, only we have not many years before us, but let us
Thank
try.
you.
It was my dream. I started working on Hampi as early as in '73, and it was my dream that one book should be published in this category, this size art book. And at that time, Hampi was not known. Many publishers, I don't know how many publishers I met, and they were all saying, no, we can't do it. And now I thank Mr. Yoko for making my dream come true.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for this, and I invite you to take a copy of this, and for the flag bearers, preservers, custodians of Indian literature in France.